My name is Ivan Elan, and I'm the director of the Center on Peace and Liberty at the Independent Institute, and I'll be moderating the session as well as making some concluding comments. But our main two speakers are here today to talk about is the war on terror creating more terrorism? Data show that international terrorism has gone up since the very broad and public war on terror began at the beginning of the decade. Is this a coincidence, or has the war on terror been counterproductive? And if so, why has it been counterproductive? Can the war on terror be adjusted to be more effective, or is the war itself a problem? And calling it a war, is that a problem? To start with, how real is the threat from future terrorism on U.S. soil of another 9/11 style attack? What's the threat there? How are we safer now than we were before is the question that's always asked. And I guess that's still an applicable question. Does 9/11 a fluke event, or does the threat continue? If the threat has been overstated, is this to justify unneeded government programs and law enforcement efforts? What is the root cause or causes of anti-U.S. terrorism? No one ever seems to talk about this. And instead of fighting a war on terror, can those causes be ameliorated in some other ways? What alternatives do we have to a war on terror to reduce terrorism? Our panelists will address such issues and more. The panelists are Ian Lustig, the Bess W. Heyman Chair in Political Science from the University of Pennsylvania, and author of our new policy paper, Our Own Strength Against Us, the War on Terror as a Self-Inflicted Disaster. And I think you've all got that on your chairs there. So this is an excellent policy paper that Ian wrote for the Institute here. And he'll be speaking first, and then commenting on the paper will be Gareth Porter, who's an independent investigative journalist and historian. And then as I mentioned, I'll conclude with some comments myself. And then, of course, we'll have much time for Q&A, which should be the most interesting part of the morning. So I'll turn it over to Ian, and he'll get started. I wanted to mention also, he is obviously no novice in the terror area. He wrote this book, Trapped in the War on Terror. And so you can copy that title down. We were supposed to have some books to sell, but they didn't arrive. So you'll have to copy that title down and go out and run out and get a copy. So I'll turn it over to you, Ian.
Thanks. Thank you, Ivan. It's a pleasure to be here again. I was very grateful for the opportunity that you gave me shortly after the book came out, when you and Randy Beers and Ed Lutvak and I were able to discuss it. I've been around the country talking about this book, which you should get on Amazon. It's cheaper that way and a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to try to pose some of those questions that Ivan mentioned that are addressed in the policy paper. I'm going to give quick, hopefully pithy renditions of those questions and give some answers, and then set the stage for hearing from the two other panelists and your questions and comments. So first, let me start with the first question, which is a kind of basic one. What is real and what is not? I'm a professor, so we ask questions like this. What is real and what is not? Well, let me tell you a story that is in the policy paper. I was at a lecture at a well-known Northeastern university in the spring of 2004, and the speaker was the official in the executive office building who was responsible for encouraging scientists to become part of the war on terror, social scientists and natural scientists. And there was a large lecture hall filled with us, and we were being told in enthusiastic terms that there was lots of money in this, and we should not worry about whether we had thought our research had to do with terrorism, because it's almost certain that given that we need to think outside the box, and you all are very smart people and you need grants, you should be applying to us for grants to study the terrorism problem and help in the war on terror, because this is a problem which the scientists really have to take over. And when I heard that the scientists had to take it over, not the government, it wasn't a political problem, I raised my hand at the end of the talk, and I said, there was one problem that we all agree was a real problem, and that was when it looked like the Germans were going to get the bomb before we did in World War II. And the government set up the Manhattan Project and basically gave all the resources that any scientist could want to the scientists to solve this problem, get a nuclear weapon before Germany does. Okay, so let's treat that Manhattan Project, I said, as a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, when the problem is real and science is therefore given complete control to solve it. And let's make a 1 Wag the Dog, the movie Wag the Dog, where there is no problem whatsoever, but politically it's necessary to, it's useful to pretend and treat it as if there's a problem. Okay, remember, I'm talking to the official who's in charge of giving out these grants and recruiting scientists for the war on terror. So I said, so where is the war on terror? Close to the Manhattan Project, a real problem, give science control, as you said, or close to Wag the Dog, the movie Wag the Dog. It's produced. So he said, I can't answer that question in public. Well, the fact is that I had the proverbial couple beers with him after the talk, and there were several other people there. I was not the only person. And I said, okay, we're not exactly in public anymore. Let me repeat my question, which I did. And 10, Manhattan Project, 1, Wag the Dog. And I said, so where is the war on terror? And he said, it's somewhere between 1 and 1.5. So what is real and what is not? Now, the next question I want to pose is, why should there be a war on terror? And the posing of that question is itself what I want to remark on. I don't know how many of you are Jewish. I'm Jewish. We have a Seder coming up. And in that Seder, in that ceremonial meal, it's traditional for the youngest child, to ask questions and for there to be a story about sons who ask different kinds of questions, good ones or bad ones. And then there's the baby in the cradle. For the one who doesn't even know how to ask a question, you should say for him. Well, that's how I feel about this question. Why should there be a war on terror? I say that because there have been countless polls, and I discuss them in my writings, whether it's the World Affairs Council or it's Gallup, countless polls on, are we winning the war on terror? Is the war in Iraq helping or hurting the war on terror? How is President Bush doing in the war on terror? Which candidate would wage the war on terror more effectively? But never, almost never, is it asked, should there be a war on terror? That's much more remarkable. You learn many more things from the polling questions than the polling answers, as a side note. So the third question I pose is, what is the image of the threat that is out there? And I'm going to telegraph my answer to that by sharing with you, this is a document you can download for free off the web from the Select Committee on Homeland Security called Freedom Defended, Implementing America's Strategy for Homeland Security. It was published in 2004, and there's a few gem-like quotations that inspire the entire publication. And one of them is from President Bush. We are today a nation at risk to a new and changing threat. The terrorist threat to America takes many forms, has many places to hide, and is often invisible, which is actually very handy for a threat. Secretary of Ridge, 2004, terrorists seek to infiltrate our society, scope out our targets, and wage war in our streets and cities. President Bush, July 2002, our society presents an almost infinite array of potential targets that can be attacked through a variety of methods. As I told you, they were gem-like quotes. The image is we are constantly at peril in almost every corner of the society. At the beginning of the policy paper, I quote from a typical scarementary on television, which is based on Stephen Flynn's book, The Edge of Disaster. He's one of the leading war on terror propagandists who came out of the government and now has been associated with the Council on Foreign Relations. And if you look at that, you'll see that this is a depiction that strikes a little close to home, since it's about Philadelphia. Everybody's down at the stadium watching a game, and all of a sudden, what happens is there's a truck filled with explosives is trundling through the back streets, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is going to the refinery. It's going to blow up this tank of hydrochlorofluoride gas, and then there's going to be a panic and a gridlock of hundreds of thousands of people, and tens of thousands will die. Okay, this was on television repeatedly. It's in the book. This is typical. Just think of in 2004, 2005 seasons of 24. All that stood between us and the maniacal but brilliant terrorists hiding everywhere in the society was Jack Bauer. You know, a tiny number of non-corrupt, capable government officials. This is the narrative, the master narrative for the last 5 or 6 years for books and movies, television shows, you name it. So that's the image the country has of it being constantly under a threat from every direction.